Poor little girl makes a request to the young billionaire. My classmates laugh at me for not having a dad. Can you be my dad at the school party? What happens next is unbelievable. The bell rang, announcing the end of another day at Rose Hill Elementary School. Children ran through the hallways, their voices echoing off the time-worn brick walls. Callie Morgan clutched her lilac backpack to her chest and waited for the wave of students to pass. Her light brown hair, tied in a simple ponytail, swayed as she walked with slow steps toward the exit. It had been a tough day, tougher than usual. Father and Child Day, Mrs. Johnson had announced, smiling at the class. Tomorrow is our annual party. Remember to bring your dads. Callie sank into her chair, trying to make herself invisible, but invisibility wasn't an option when you're 5 years old and the only kid in the class without a father to bring. Callie has no daddy, chanted Tommy Lewis during recess. His freckled face twisted into a mean smile. So Callie has no daddy. Other children joined in, forming a circle around her. Callie closed her eyes, wishing the ground would open up and swallow her. She's not going to bring anyone, Megan mocked, loud enough for Callie to hear. We've never seen her dad. I don't think she even has one. She didn't respond. Her mother had taught her not to pay attention to taunts. Words only have power if you give it to them, honey, Tessa would say, stroking her hair on the nights Callie cried. Now, walking down the hall, Callie felt the weight of her classmates' words. They were heavier than her backpack, heavier than all the books in the world. Mrs. Johnson had tried to help, of course. All families are different, she explained to the class. Some have 2 dads, some have 2 mums, some have just a mum or just a dad, some have grandparents. All of them are special. But well-intentioned words didn't silence the laughter, nor did they fill the empty space next to her mom at school meetings. Callie reached the main gate and stopped. Her mum was always a few minutes late. She worked as a cleaner in a big building downtown, and sometimes the bus was slow. Callie didn't mind waiting. The school monitor, Mrs. Davis, always stayed with her until her mum arrived. That's when she saw him. A tall man in a dark suit was standing next to a shiny black car. He wasn't like the other dads who drove dented cars or arrived on foot, tired after a day's work. This man looked important, like the executives in the magazines her mom flipped through at the doctor's office. He was looking at his phone, his face serious, focused. There was something about him, maybe the way he stood apart from the other adults, or how his shoulders seemed to carry an invisible weight, that made Callie think that, despite the nice suit and expensive car, he might understand what it felt like to be alone. An idea began to form in her mind. A crazy, absurd, desperate idea. Before she could think better of it, Callie let go of Mrs. Davis's hand and walked toward the stranger. Her small pink sneakers scuffed on the concrete as she approached, her hands sweating around the straps of her backpack. The man didn't notice her until she was just a few steps away. When he finally looked up from his phone, his gaze was distant, as if he were still reading messages in his mind. "Excuse me, sir," Callie said, her voice so small she could barely hear it herself. The man blinked, finally registering the little girl's presence. His eyes were a deep blue, like the sky after the rain has passed. "Yes," he replied, his voice deep but not threatening. Callie took a deep breath. It was now or never. "My classmates laugh at me for not having a dad." She swallowed hard, fighting back the tears that threatened to fall. "Can you be my dad just for one day at the school party?" Wes Barrett, CEO of Barrett Enterprises and a young billionaire, had heard many requests in his 30 years of life, requests for loans, for promotions, for second chances, but never, in his entire meteoric career as a businessman, had anyone asked him to be a father, even if it was just for a day. He looked at the little girl in front of him, small for her age, with big brown eyes that seemed to hold a universe of emotions. There was a quiet dignity about her, even with her chin trembling slightly as she waited for his answer. Wes began, but the words failed him. What was he even doing here? His driver had called to say the car needed an emergency repair, and he had decided to wait in front of some random school in a neighborhood far from the city center. He wanted to get away from the office for a few hours, away from the meetings, the spreadsheets, the decisions that affected hundreds of lives. And now this child was asking him for something he didn't know if he could give. I think you're confused, little one. I don't know you, or your mother. I can't just show up at a school party, he replied, more bluntly than he intended. Callie didn't back down. Instead, she lifted her chin in a brave attempt not to show her disappointment. At the party is tomorrow at 2 o'clock, she informed him, as if she hadn't heard his refusal. You just have to show up and say you're my dad. No one will know. A woman, probably the school monitor, was looking at them with growing concern. In a few seconds, she would come over to see what was happening. Callie, the woman called out. Come over here, sweetie. Your mom will be here soon. I have to go, and Callie said quickly. My name is Callie Morgan, room 1B, if you want to come. She hesitated, then added, please. Before Wes could answer, the girl ran back to the monitor, who cast a suspicious glance in his direction. He quickly turned his attention back to his phone, pretending to be busy until his driver arrived with the backup car. 15 minutes later, Wes was in the back seat of another black sedan, heading to the meeting he had postponed. But his mind wasn't on contracts or numbers. Instead, he saw brown eyes begging for something he had never considered giving anyone: his time. Wes had no family. His parents separated when he was just 3. His mother, a waitress who worked 2 jobs to support him, died of cancer when he was in his early 20s, leaving him alone in the world. With only a promising idea and unwavering determination, Wes turned a garage startup into a tech empire. His meteoric rise to becoming a billionaire before 30 made him one of the most recognized faces in the business world, the personification of the American dream, the poor boy who never knew his father and changed his own destiny. Relationships, only professional ones. Friendships, superficial at best. Mr. Barrett, we've arrived, the driver informed him, interrupting his thoughts. The Barrett Enterprises headquarters rose majestically against the afternoon sky. 40 floors of glass and steel, a monument to his success, and somehow, for the first time, it felt empty. The rest of the day passed in a haze. Wes spoke when necessary, signed documents, made decisions. But a part of his mind kept returning to that moment at the school gate. Can you be my dad just for one day? How desperate did a child have to be to approach a stranger with such a request? What did she face daily to get to this point? That night, in his penthouse apartment, Wes poured himself a whiskey and walked to the window. The city sparkled below. Millions of lights, millions of interconnected lives. Somewhere in that urban vastness was a little girl named Callie Morgan, probably lying in her bed, already knowing that tomorrow she would face another day of teasing. Wes picked up his tablet and, almost without thinking, typed the school's name into the search engine. The official page appeared immediately. Rose Hill Elementary School, building the future of the community. A few clicks revealed the events calendar, and there it was. Father and Child Day, 2 p.m., school gym. It would be crazy, completely irrational. He had 3 important meetings scheduled for the next day. People were counting on his presence, on his decisions. But the image of those brown eyes wouldn't leave him. Wes picked up the phone and dialed his assistant. Margot, I need you to rearrange my schedule for tomorrow afternoon. Mr. Barrett. The surprise in her voice was evident. In 5 years of working together, he had never requested a last-minute change without a major reason. Personal commitment has come up, he explained, knowing how strange it sounded. Wes Barrett didn't have personal commitments. Is there a problem, sir? No, Margot. In fact, it might be the exact opposite. After hanging up, Wes returned to the window. The whiskey in his glass remained untouched. For the first time in years, perhaps for the first time since becoming an adult, he was about to do something purely on impulse, not for strategy, not for calculation, not out of obligation. Can you be my dad just for one day? The words kept echoing. For some reason he couldn't explain, that simple sentence had pierced the armor he had built over decades. An unknown little girl, with a lilac backpack and eyes full of hope, had found a crack in the armor that not even his closest partners could penetrate. As he prepared for bed, Wes tried to convince himself he was just doing a good deed. The kind of gesture that would make a good story to tell at some charity dinner. Yes, I once helped a child in need. But deep down, He knew there was something more. There was something about that girl that touched Wes deeply. Maybe it was her hopeful eyes, or the courage to approach a stranger with such a sincere request, or maybe, on a level he could barely admit to himself, it was because he understood. He had also grown up without a father, facing the same questions, the same looks, the same taunts. The difference was that no one had shown up to hold his hand when he needed it most, just for one day. The words echoed in his mind. One day could mean so much to that child. One day could change something, even if it was small. One day that he, Wes Barrett, could give. It wasn't a calculated decision. It wasn't a strategic move. It was purely human, purely instinctive, something the young billionaire rarely allowed himself. Sleep was slow to come, and when it finally did, Wes dreamed of an elementary school, of laughing children, and of a small hand holding his as they walked through the playground together. The next morning, as his driver navigated the city traffic, Wes looked out the window with a strange sense of anticipation. He had chosen a less formal suit, opting for a navy blazer and grey slacks. More appropriate for a school party, he thought. "Where to, sir?" the driver asked. Wes hesitated for only a second. "Rose Hill Elementary School," he replied, the name feeling foreign on his tongue. "And cancel my appointments until the end of the afternoon." The driver nodded, showing no surprise. Years of service had taught him not to question his boss's destinations or decisions. As the car moved through the streets, gradually leaving the downtown skyscrapers behind for simpler neighborhoods, Wes wondered what he would say when he got there. How would he explain his presence? What if the girl's mother was there? What would happen when they found out he was a complete stranger? But above all these questions, one stood out. Why was he doing this? The answer remained hazy, but there was a growing certainty in his chest. For the first time in a long time, Wes Barrett was following not market logic, not business strategy, not the most efficient path, but something he barely recognized in himself, an impulse of the heart. Wes had the car stop across the street, watching the activity at the school gate. Fathers and children were arriving in a steady stream. Some men wore suits, coming straight from work. Others were in casual clothes, jeans and t-shirts with sports team logos. He took a deep breath, adjusted his shirt collar, and checked his watch. 2 o'clock sharp. With one last look in the rearview mirror, he got out of the car. Inside, Callie was waiting on a wooden bench in the main hallway. Her legs dangled without touching the floor, and with every new adult that entered, she craned her neck, her anxious eyes searching for a face she wasn't sure would come. "Callie Morgan." Mrs. Johnson's voice sounded gentle behind her. "Your mother called to say she's at work, but she'll come as soon as she can," she said, running a hand through the girl's hair. "Shall we go to the gym with the others?" Callie hesitated. If she went to the gym now, alone, everyone would see. Tommy and his friends were already there, each with their dads, proudly showing off the adults accompanying them. She could wait a little longer, give it one more chance. "Can I stay here just 5 more minutes?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. Mrs. Johnson looked at the wall clock. 5 minutes, she agreed. "Then we have to go, okay?" Callie nodded, turning her attention back to the door. 4 minutes. 3. 2. The door opened, and for a moment the sun created a golden silhouette around a tall figure. Callie squinted, unsure. And then, he was there. Wes Barrett walked into the school hallway, completely out of place in his perfectly tailored navy blazer. His eyes scanned the room until they met hers. "Callie?" Her face lit up. In an instant, she jumped off the bench and ran to him. "You came!" she exclaimed, stopping a few feet away, suddenly shy. "I thought you wouldn't come." Wes knelt to be at her level, feeling the curious gaze of Mrs. Johnson from a distance. "I said I would, didn't I?" he replied with a half smile. For a moment, they just looked at each other, two strangers united by an unlikely promise. Then, in a gesture that surprised them both, Callie held out her hand. "The party has already started. We have to go to the gym." Wes took the small hand in his, and together they walked down the hall past Mrs. Johnson, who watched the scene with a puzzled expression. "Mrs. Johnson, this is my dad," Callie introduced, with a confidence that hadn't existed the day before. Wes extended his free hand. "Wes Barrett, a pleasure to meet you." "Jennifer Johnson," the teacher replied, shaking his hand. "I don't believe we've met at the parent meetings before. Unfortunately, my work commitments rarely align with school hours," Wes improvised. "But I'm glad I could be here today." Before the conversation could venture into dangerous territory, Callie pulled his hand. "Come on. I don't want to miss the sack race." The gym was decorated with colorful balloons and banners that read, "Happy Father and Child Day." Activity stations were scattered around the space, one for t-shirt painting, another for building with blocks, a makeshift track for the sack race, and an area with tables for snacks. When they entered, several heads turned. Callie walked with her head held high, her small hand firmly holding Wes's. She led him straight to the painting station. "We have to make matching shirts," she explained seriously. "It's a tradition." Wes watched the other fathers and children, all focused on painting white t-shirts with colorful paint. Some were drawing superheroes, others writing messages like "World's Best Dad." "What should we paint?" he asked, picking up a brush. Callie thought for a moment. "A star for you and a star for me," she decided, "because stars shine in the dark and are never alone in the sky." Something tightened in Wes's chest. How could a 5-year-old formulate such a profound thought? He nodded, unable to speak for a moment. They worked side by side, painting large golden stars on their shirts. Wes's was clumsy, with uneven points. Callie's was even more crooked, but she smiled with pride when she finished. "Now we're a star team," she declared. Wes laughed, surprising himself. He couldn't remember the last time he had truly laughed, without calculating its effect at some meeting or social event. From t-shirt painting, they moved on to the sack race. Wes, who commanded board meetings with absolute authority, was now hopping awkwardly inside a burlap sack, drawing laughs from Callie and amused looks from the other dads. "You have to jump faster," she shouted, already ahead, hopping with the surprising coordination of a 5-year-old. Wes tried harder, determined not to disappoint her. In the end, they finished in 4th place out of 8 pairs, which Callie considered an absolute victory. "See, we almost won," she said, breathless and beaming. The afternoon continued with building block towers. Theirs collapsed spectacularly, causing more laughter. Drawing with crayons, Callie drew a portrait of him that looked more like an alien. And finally, a snack of sandwiches, fruit and juice. Sitting at a low table, Wes watched Callie eat her peanut butter sandwich, leaving crumbs everywhere. There was a lightness about her now, so different from the sad-eyed girl who had approached him the day before. "Did you have fun?" she asked between bites. "A lot," he answered honestly. And it was true. The missed meetings, the unanswered emails, the postponed decisions, none of it mattered now. For the first time in years, Wes Barrett was fully present in the moment, not thinking about the next move, the next deal, the next problem to solve. "Tommy said you weren't my real dad," Callie commented casually, looking at her juice box. "But I told him he was wrong." Wes felt a lump in his throat. "And what did he say after that?" "Nothing. He got quiet after you won the ring toss game," she smiled. "You threw it really far." A photographer hired by the school was circulating the event, capturing moments between fathers and children. When he approached them, Callie immediately straightened her posture. "Can we get a picture?" she asked the photographer, who nodded. Callie positioned herself next to Wes, as serious as if she were posing for an official portrait. "Smile," she instructed in a low voice. The flash went off once, twice. In the second photo, Wes put his arm around Callie's small shoulders, and they both smiled genuinely. "I'd like a copy of these," Wes said to the photographer. "Both of them, please." As the afternoon wore on, more activities were completed. At some point, Wes noticed he was being watched by a few mothers and a couple of fathers. Maybe they were wondering who the man in the expensive suit was that they had never seen before. Or maybe they just noticed how out of place he seemed, trying to fit into a world of simplicity and childish joy. But none of that mattered. The only opinion he cared about was that of the little girl who was now pulling him to the last activity. A circle dance that left Wes completely awkward, but made Callie roar with laughter. When the clock struck 4:30, Mrs. Johnson announced the end of the party. Parents and children began to say their goodbyes, collecting their creations and belongings. Callie and Wes walked to the main gate, each carrying their newly painted t-shirt. A school secretary handed him an envelope with the photos printed on the spot. "Thank you for coming," Callie said, her voice suddenly small again. "It was the best day." Wes knelt in front of her. "Thank you for inviting me," he replied, surprised by the sincerity in his own voice. Callie hesitated, then asked, "Can you come another day too?" The question hung between them. Wes knew he should say no. This was the deal. One day, just one. Coming back into her life would complicate everything. It would create expectations. It would open doors he didn't know if he could keep open. But looking into those hopeful eyes, remembering the pure joy of those hours, Wes Barrett, the billionaire who never made a decision without analyzing all the angles, answered with his heart. "Yes," he said, smiling. "So I'd like that very much." The smile that lit up Callie's face was worth more than any deal he had ever closed. She threw herself into his arms in an impulsive hug, and for a moment, everything in the world felt perfectly right. Separating, she asked, "Promise." "I promise," Wes replied, knowing that, for the first time in a long time, he was making a promise he was determined to keep, no matter the cost. Saturdays took on a new meaning for Wes Barrett. Before, they were just another day to work without the hassle of meetings, quiet hours in his penthouse office, analyzing reports and planning new acquisitions. Now they were days of parks, ice cream, and conversations with a 5-year-old girl who, in some inexplicable way, had become important in his life. 3 Saturdays had passed since the school party. On the first, Wes took Callie to the zoo. She had never seen an elephant up close, and was so amazed that she insisted on standing in front of the enclosure for almost an hour. On the second, they went to the movies to watch an animated film about robots with feelings. Callie ate popcorn until she felt sick, but assured him it was worth it. On the third Yom, a rainy day took them to the Science Museum, where she ran from exhibit to exhibit, absorbing everything with eager eyes. At each meeting, the routine was the same. Wes would pick Callie up from the door of the small apartment on the second floor of a simple building. She would already be waiting, dressed and anxious, sometimes holding a drawing she had made especially for him. A woman, presumably her mother, would just give a quick wave from the partially open door, without introducing herself or making conversation. On their return, it was the same, a quick thank you, a closing door, and Wes would go back to his world of glass and steel, carrying memories of childish laughter and surprisingly deep questions. On the 4th Saturday, something changed. Wes stood in front of the worn brick building. The paint on the windows was peeling, and the entrance handrail was slightly crooked, but the place was clean and well kept, within the limitations of a working-class neighborhood. He checked the time, 9:30 a.m., precisely as they had arranged. He walked up the stairs to the second floor and knocked on the door of apartment 2B. He heard quick, excited footsteps, Callie's certainly, and then an adult voice saying something in a low tone. The door opened, and for the first time, it wasn't Callie who greeted him, but a young woman. She was a few inches shorter than him, with brown hair tied in a simple bun. Dark circles marked her eyes, which were the same intense shade of brown as Callie's. She wore faded jeans and a light blue blouse, simple but impeccably clean. "Mr. Barrett," she asked, extending her hand. "I'm Tessa Morgan, Callie's mother." Wes shook her hand, noticing the calluses and slightly rough skin, hands that worked hard. "Wes, please," he replied. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you formally." "Likewise," Tessa said, without smiling. There was caution in her eyes, the natural reserve of a single mother facing the stranger who had inexplicably taken an interest in her daughter. "Callie is just finishing getting ready. Would you like to come in for a moment?" The invitation took Wes by surprise. On previous Saturdays, he hadn't crossed the threshold. He nodded and stepped into the small apartment. The space was compact but organized with precision. A small living room with a second-hand sofa covered by a colorful blanket. A coffee table with a stack of children's books. On the wall, drawings made by Callie, framed with colored cardboard. The kitchen was visible through a counter, small with old appliances but spotlessly clean. Coffee? Tessa offered, indicating a chair at the kitchen table. That would be great, Wes replied, sitting down. Tessa moved around the kitchen efficiently, like someone who knows every inch of the space. As the coffee maker worked, an uncomfortable silence hung between them. Callie has been talking a lot about you, Tessa finally said, breaking the silence. Apparently, you know all the names of the dinosaurs and why the sky is blue. Wes smiled. I had to look up the dinosaurs the night before, and the explanation about the sky was pretty simplified. Tessa placed a cup of coffee in front of him. There was no cream or sugar, and he didn't ask. Can I ask, she began, sitting across from him, why a man like you is spending his Saturdays with a 5-year-old girl? Most billionaires don't usually hang out at playgrounds or in ice cream lines. The question was direct, but the tone wasn't accusatory. Just curious and perhaps slightly worried. Wes thought carefully before answering. The truth seemed like the only option. Callie approached me outside the school the day before the Father and Child Day. She asked if I could pretend to be her dad for a day. He watched Tessa's expression, looking for signs of shock or anger, but she just listened intently. I know it sounds strange, but something in that request, it moved me. I grew up without a father too. I know how hard it is. Tessa took a sip of her own coffee, her eyes never leaving his. So you showed up at the party, she concluded. Yes. The plan was just to go that one time, but when she asked if I could come back, Wes shrugged. I couldn't say no. Tessa nodded slowly, processing the information. Samaham. Callie's voice broke the moment as she ran into the kitchen, already dressed in jeans and a purple t-shirt with a unicorn on it. She stopped when she saw Wes. You already met my mum. Yes, we were just introducing ourselves, Wes replied, smiling at the girl. Are we going to the amusement park today? Callie asked, practically jumping with excitement. If your mother agrees, Wes replied, looking at Tessa. Tessa watched her daughter, noticing the sparkle in her eyes, the excitement that had been missing for so long. Then she looked at Wes, evaluating him. Be back by 5, she said finally. And not too much sugar. She gets impossible. Mom, Callie protested, but her smile was radiant. After they left the apartment, Tessa watched from the window as Wes helped Callie into the car, making sure her seatbelt was properly fastened. There was care in his gestures, a genuine attention that was hard to fake. Tessa wasn't naive. She knew she should be suspicious. Rich men don't just walk into the lives of poor families for no reason. But she also saw the change in her daughter, the renewed confidence, the pride when she talked about her friend Wes. The nightmares had lessened, and she no longer cried before going to school. The apartment fell silent after they left. Tessa returned to the pile of clothes to be ironed, her second job doing sewing and ironing work to supplement her salary as a cleaner. Her hands were calloused and her back constantly ached, but she never complained. There was no time or space for weakness in her life. As she worked, she thought about Wes Barrett. She had Googled him after the first Saturday, when Callie came home talking non-stop about her new friend. Young, self-made billionaire, private, no scandals, no wife, no children. What did he want with a 5-year-old girl from a poor neighborhood? But the answer he had given, about growing up without a father, about being touched by Callie's request. It seemed sincere. At 5 o'clock sharp, Wes's car pulled up in front of the building again. Tessa watched from the window as he walked Callie to the door, carrying a small teddy bear that had likely come from the amusement park. Callie was talking non-stop, gesturing excitedly, and Wes was listening with genuine attention, nodding and laughing at the right moments. When they knocked on the door, Tessa opened it, and Callie immediately launched into recounting her adventures. Mom, we went on the roller coaster. Well, the little one, because Wes said the big one isn't for my age yet, but it was amazing anyway. And I won this bear at the ring toss, but Wes helped a little bit. Tessa smiled at her daughter, stroking her hair. Go put your things away, sweetie. I need to talk to Mr. Barrett for a minute. Callie looked between them, hesitant but obeyed, taking her new bear to her room. In the hallway, Tessa faced Wes directly. She's happy, she said simply. Happier than I've seen her in a long time. Wes nodded. She's an extraordinary kid. She is, Tessa agreed. Then, after a pause, Next Saturday, maybe you'd like to have dinner with us after your outing. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti and sauce. But Callie would like that. The invitation hung between them, heavy with meaning. It wasn't just a dinner. It was an opening, a reluctant attempt to let this stranger a little further into their lives. "I'd be honored," Wes replied, realizing he meant it. Tessa nodded, not smiling, but her eyes had softened. 7 o'clock. Then, as Wes walked down the stairs, he felt a strange lightness. Behind him, in a simple second-floor apartment, a tired mother was hugging an excited little girl, listening to stories about a perfect day. Two lives that were now somehow intertwined with his. Monday dawned grey, with heavy clouds promising rain. Wes arrived at the Barrett Enterprises headquarters earlier than usual. He liked the silence of the building before the flood of executives, analysts and assistants invaded the halls with the buzz of business and ambition. 6:30 in the morning. The main lobby was still empty, except for the security guards who greeted him with respect. He nodded back, heading for the private elevator that would take him straight to the 40th floor, the top of the building, where his office occupied half the space. The meeting with the Japanese investors was scheduled for 9, and he wanted to review the numbers one last time. The acquisition of the solar technology network was important, not just for the immediate profit, but for the direction it would give the company in the coming years. The elevator rose smoothly. Wes adjusted his tie, thinking about how he would explain the change in strategy to the board. Some of the more conservative members wouldn't look kindly on investing in sustainable energy. To them, Barrett Enterprises should stick to the financial and real estate sectors, where profits were predictable. But Wes had other plans. Maybe it was the time spent with Callie, listening to her innocent concerns about polar bears and forests, or maybe it was just a clearer vision of the future. Either way, he was determined to direct at least 30% of the company's investments into green technologies over the next 5 years. The elevator stopped on the 35th floor. The doors opened, revealing a partially lit hallway. Strange. This floor housed the legal department, and rarely did anyone arrive before 8. Wes hesitated, about to press the button to continue up, when he noticed movement at the end of the hall. A figure in a grey uniform was pushing a cleaning cart, the janitorial staff, probably. On impulse, he held the elevator door and stepped out. He would walk through the 35th floor and take the regular elevator later. A surprise inspection always kept everyone on their toes. The hallway smelled of cleaning solution, a subtle citrus scent. The marble floor gleamed under the lights that turned on automatically with his movement. As he walked, he could hear the soft hum of a vacuum cleaner in one of the meeting rooms. Reaching the open door, Wes stopped. With her back to him, a woman was meticulously vacuuming under the long conference table. Her brown hair was covered by a hairnet, and she moved with the efficiency of someone who knows her job well. There was something familiar about her. The way she moved, the posture of her shoulders. As if sensing his presence, the woman turned off the vacuum and turned around. Her eyes widened in recognition and shock. His probably mirrored the same expression. "Tessa?" She remained motionless for a moment, then straightened her shoulders. "Mr. Barrett." The silence that followed was thick, filled with unasked questions. Wes tried to process the information. Tessa, Callie's mother, working as a cleaner in his building. For how long? How had he never noticed her before? "You work here," he said finally. A statement, not a question. "For 3 years," Tessa replied, her voice calm but tense. "The night shift, from 4 to 10, the outsourced cleaning company placed me in this building." Wes nodded slowly, absorbing the information. That's why she always looked tired. She worked from the early morning, probably slept a few hours during the day while Callie was at school, and then took care of her daughter in the afternoon and evening, and she still did extra sewing and ironing jobs, as she had casually mentioned during dinner the previous Saturday. "I didn't know," he said. "There was no way you could know," Tessa replied, turning the vacuum back on. "We have orders to finish before the executives arrive." Wes stood there, not sure what to say or do. The dynamic between them had changed drastically. He was no longer just the rich man who had happened to enter her daughter's life. Now he was her employer, indirectly, but an employer nonetheless. I need to finish the floor by 7, Tessa said, her voice professional. Can I help you with something, Mr. Barrett? The formality stung more than Wes expected. No, I was just walking through, he replied, feeling out of place. Carry on with your work. He left the room, heading to the elevator with quick steps. As he rode up to his floor, a strange feeling washed over him, part guilt, part anger at himself. How had he never noticed the people who kept his empire running? How many others like Tessa worked in the shadows, invisible to him, and everyone who occupied the luxurious offices? The day passed in a blur. Wes conducted the meeting with the Japanese investors on autopilot, his body present, but his mind repeatedly returning to the image of Tessa cleaning the floor he walked on every day. At 10 in the morning, when he should have been in the board meeting, Wes went down to the basement, where the maintenance and cleaning department was located. The supervisor, a middle-aged man named Harris, became visibly nervous seeing the CEO show up unannounced. Mr. Barrett, is there a problem with the cleaning on your floor? No, Harris. Everything is impeccable, as always, Wes replied. Actually, I want some information about an employee, Tessa Morgan. Harris frowned, pulling out a tablet. Morgan? Yes, he outsourced from CleanPro, has been with us for 3 years and 2 months. Is there a problem with her? On the contrary, I want to know about her working conditions. For the next 20 minutes, Wes heard about the hours, wages and benefits, or lack thereof, of the outsourced employees. He found out that Tessa earned just slightly above minimum wage, with no proper health insurance, no paid vacation, no security or prospect of advancement. She's never complained, Harris added, as if that were the highest praise. Always punctual, always efficient. Wes left the department with a new resolve. He couldn't change Tessa's situation directly, without drawing undue attention to her, but he could change the system that kept her in that position. At the end of the afternoon, after hours of meetings and calls, Wes asked Margot, his assistant, to find Tessa before she left the building. The conversation had to happen. There was no avoiding it. At 10:15 p.m., Tessa entered his office, still wearing her grey uniform, now covered by a simple coat. Her face showed the fatigue of a long shift, but her eyes held the dignity Wes had noticed before. "You wanted to see me," she said, not making it a question. Wes indicated a chair, but Tessa remained standing. "I'd rather stand." "What is it?" "Is Callie okay?" "Callie is fine, as far as I know," Wes replied. "I wanted to talk about what I found out today." Tessa crossed her arms. "There's nothing to talk about. I work here. You own the building. A coincidence? It's not just a coincidence, Tessa. You've been cleaning the floor where my office is every morning for 3 years, and I never noticed. And why would you?" The question wasn't bitter, just realistic. People like you rarely notice people like me. We're part of the infrastructure, like the plumbing or the electrical wiring. You only notice when something doesn't work. Wes absorbed the blow, recognizing the truth in her words. "I want to change that," he said, "not just for you, but for all the outsourced employees." Tessa tilted her head, sizing him up. "What exactly does that mean?" "For starters, I'm going to terminate the contract with CleanPro and bring all the maintenance services in-house, fair wages, full benefits, opportunities for growth." "Why?" Tessa asked, her gaze piercing. "Because of Callie. Because you know me now." Wes hesitated. "Partly," he admitted. Knowing you and Callie made me see something I should have noticed before, but it's not just that. It's the right thing to do." Tessa uncrossed her arms, her posture relaxing slightly. "I don't need pity. I just want my daughter to have opportunities," she said firmly, her eyes fixed on his. "Hard work doesn't bother me. It never has. I'll do whatever it takes for her to have a better life than I did." There was pride in her voice, and a determination that Wes deeply admired. This was not a woman asking for help or favors. This was a warrior protecting her daughter's future. "It's not pity," he assured her. "It's respect." Tessa studied his face for a long moment, then gave a barely perceptible nod. "So I do what you think you have to do with your company," she said. "But I don't want special treatment. If I'm going to keep working here, it will be for the same reasons as before. because I do a good job and because I need the paycheck. Understood. She turned to leave, then paused with her hand on the doorknob. And what about Callie? What happens now? Wes hadn't considered that aspect. How would this change his relationship with the girl? Nothing changes, he replied. If you agree, I'll continue visiting her on Saturdays. This has nothing to do with work. After a moment's hesitation, Tessa nodded. She would be devastated if you disappeared now. Then she left, closing the door softly behind her. In the following weeks, Wes put his promise into practice, though more discreetly than he had initially planned. Instead of a grand corporate announcement, he implemented gradual changes that wouldn't draw specific attention to Tessa. First, the cleaning crew received new equipment, lighter, more efficient vacuums, less toxic products, more ergonomic carts. Small improvements that made the work less strenuous. Then, without fanfare, he reviewed the policy for hiring third-party contractors, stipulating minimum conditions that companies had to offer their employees, including basic health insurance and safe transportation for those working the graveyard shift. In a board meeting, he presented a plan to progressively internalize the maintenance and cleaning services, arguing with cold hard numbers about efficiency and talent retention. The board approved, unaware of the true motivation behind the proposal. For Callie, anonymous gifts began to arrive at school, advanced children's books that Wes knew she would love, an educational tablet with math and science games, professional quality art supplies. When Tessa asked her daughter about the gifts, Callie just smiled and said, "Mrs. Johnson said they came from donors for kids who are good at science." To the apartment, mysterious deliveries arrived, a new refrigerator when the old one broke, a weekly basket of fresh fruits and vegetables that the school was sending as part of a nutrition program, school supplies that were left over from the company's donation drive. Wes knew he couldn't do this indefinitely. Tessa was too observant not to notice, and indeed on a Thursday night, after a month of these small interventions, his phone rang. "I know what you're doing," Tessa said without preamble when he answered. Wes didn't try to deny it. "And it bothers you." "I don't want charity." "It's not charity," he replied. "Consider it an investment in the future." "Whose future?" Her voice was challenging, but there was no real anger in it. "Callie's, yours, mine." There was a long silence. "Why?" she asked finally, her voice softer. Wes considered several elaborate answers, logical justifications for his actions, but in the end he opted for the simple truth. "Because you matter to me." Another silence, this one more thoughtful. "The new fridge is too big for the kitchen," Tessa said finally. "And the fruit baskets are overkill. Nobody eats that much mango." Wes smiled, understanding what she wasn't saying. "I'll adjust that. And Wes," she rarely called him by his first name, "I'm not trying to fix your life. I just want to be part of it." The echo of her own words returned to him with sincerity, made something tighten in his chest. "Thank you," was all he could manage to reply. The following Saturday, when Wes arrived to pick up Callie, Tessa greeted him with a cup of coffee, black, just how he liked it. She didn't thank him for the changes at work, the discreet gifts, the small interventions that made her life a little less difficult. But as he left with Callie, Tessa handed him a small package wrapped in brown paper. "What's this?" he asked. "Open it later," she replied simply. Hours later, after dropping Callie off at home, Wes opened the package in his car. It was a drawing framed with colored cardboard, clearly made by Callie's small hand. On the paper were two stick figures, a small one wearing purple, Callie, and a tall one wearing blue, him, holding hands in a park with green trees and a slide. At the top, in irregular colored letters, was written, "Me and my friend Wes." There was no card, no additional message. It wasn't necessary. In the silent language they were developing, the gift said everything that needed to be said. Tessa was no longer stopping him from being a part of their lives, and, for the first time in a long time, Wes Barrett felt like he belonged somewhere. Rain fell gently over the city as Wes parked in front of Tessa and Callie's building on a Wednesday night. It wasn't Saturday, his usual visiting day, but Callie had a school presentation about the solar system, and she had insisted he be there. "It's important," she had said over the phone, with the seriousness only a 5-year-old can have when talking about something that truly matters. I'm going to be Jupiter. I have a speech and everything. How could he say no to that? Wes grabbed his umbrella and walked to the entrance. Over the last 3 months, the routine had gradually expanded. It started with Saturdays, then occasional dinners, then some Sundays. Now, he was present for special moments like this, a dedicated spectator in Callie's developing life. Tessa opened the door before he even knocked, as if she had been waiting by the window. "She's been ready for an hour," she said with a small smile. "The most anxious planet in the galaxy." Wes stepped inside, taking in the familiar scent of cinnamon and vanilla that always hung in the apartment. Tessa baked when she was nervous, and it seemed today had been a day for many cookies. "Wes," Callie appeared, running from her room, already dressed in an impressive homemade Jupiter costume. An orange t-shirt decorated with the great red spot and other planetary details, a skirt that seemed to have layers representing the atmospheric bands, and a headband with small moons made of styrofoam balls. She hugged his legs tightly, and he bent down to return the hug properly. "Wow, Jupiter in person, I'm honored," he said, admiring the costume. "Did you make this?" he asked Tessa. "We made it together," she replied. "Callie drew the design. I just executed it." "It's amazing," he praised sincerely. "Ready to shine on stage?" Callie nodded enthusiastically. "I memorized all my lines. Want to hear?" "Absolutely." As Callie recited facts about the largest planet in the solar system, "I have 67 known moons, and a storm on me can last for hundreds of years." Wes noticed Tessa's gaze. There was something different about it today, a softness that went beyond gratitude or initial tolerance. "Okay, we have to go," Tessa announced, gently interrupting the planetary monologue. "Mrs. Johnson asked us to get there 15 minutes early." On the short drive to the school, Callie continued practicing her lines in the back seat, while Wes drove and Tessa checked that all the costume details were perfect. They worked well as a team, Wes realized, each naturally finding their role in this strange unit they had formed. Rose Hill Elementary was lit up and full of anxious parents when they arrived. The auditorium had been decorated with planets hanging from the ceiling and stars on the walls. Teachers rushed around, organizing excited children in their colorful costumes. "I have to go backstage," Callie announced with importance. "You guys sit together, okay, in the front so I can see you." "Of course, sweetie," Tessa promised. "We'll be right where you can see us." Callie hesitated for a moment, then looked at Wes with huge eyes. "You're going to stay until the end, right?" "Wouldn't miss it for the world," he assured her. She smiled, satisfied, and then shot out a phrase that changed everything. "Thanks, Dad. See you after the show." And she ran off to join the other children, completely oblivious to the impact of her words. Wes stood paralyzed. Dad. She had called him Dad. It wasn't forced, it wasn't rehearsed, it came out naturally, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. He looked at Tessa, who seemed equally surprised. "She's never—" Wes began. "No," Tessa confirmed softly. "That's the first time." They found seats in the second row, exactly where Callie could see them. Wes sat down, still processing what had just happened. It was something he should have anticipated, considering the time they spent together, the bonds they had been building. But hearing the word, so loaded with meaning, with responsibility, hit him like an unexpected wave. "Are you okay?" Tessa asked, noticing his expression. "Yeah, just—" He searched for the right words. "I wasn't prepared." Tessa nodded, understanding. "She's grown attached to you, more than I imagined would happen." "Does that bother you?" Wes asked, suddenly worried. She thought for a moment, then answered honestly, "I thought it would. But seeing how she blooms when you're around, no, it doesn't bother me. It just worries me. What happens if you get tired of this arrangement?" Her voice was calm, without accusation. "She's already lost one father. She can't lose another." Wes's reply was cut short by the start of the show. The lights dimmed, and Mrs. Johnson walked onto the small stage to introduce Our Cosmic Neighborhood, an educational musical about the solar system. First came the sun, played by a robust boy wrapped in golden yellow fabric. Then Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, each planet with its moment in the spotlight and a short speech about its characteristics. When Jupiter took the stage, Wes felt a pride he didn't know was possible. Callie walked with confidence, spinning slowly to show the colorful bands of her costume, and then recited her lines perfectly without hesitating once. When she finished, she looked directly at where Wes and Tessa were sitting and smiled, a smile as radiant as the sun who had just sung the opening number. In the applause that followed, Wes realized he was smiling so much his cheeks hurt. Beside him, Tessa clapped enthusiastically, a mother's pride evident in every line of her face. The presentation continued, moving through Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and finally, the dwarf planet Pluto, who received extra applause for his emotional line about still being part of the family, even if I'm different. The finale was a grand cosmic dance, with all the planets revolving around the sun, while singing about the harmony of the universe. When the lights came up, Callie ran to them, still beaming with post-performance adrenaline. "Did you see? I said everything right, and I wasn't even nervous." "You were incredible," Wes said, genuinely impressed. "The best Jupiter of all time." "Of all the solar systems," Tessa added, hugging her daughter. Callie looked at them both, her eyes shining. "Can we get ice cream to celebrate?" Tessa glanced at Wes. It was already late for a 5-year-old, but special occasions deserved exceptions. "Just today," she agreed, "but a small one." The ice cream shop near the school was almost closing, but the owner, used to the post-school event rush, welcomed them with a tired smile. Callie chose a strawberry ice cream with chocolate topping and ate it as if it were the best thing in the world, recounting every moment of her performance over and over. Back at the apartment, it was already past bedtime. Callie yawned as she climbed the stairs, the energy from the show finally dissipating. "Can I have a story before bed?" she asked as Tessa helped her change from her Jupiter costume into pajamas with star prints. "Of course. Which one do you want tonight?" Tessa asked. Callie looked at Wes, who was standing in the doorway of the small bedroom. "I want Dad to tell it." There it was again, that word. This time, however, it was direct, intentional. Not a casual slip, but a choice. Tessa and Wes exchanged a look, a silent conversation passing between them. "If he wants to," Tessa replied finally. Wes sat on the edge of the bed as Callie snuggled under the covers. "What story would you like to hear?" "One about Jupiter," she decided. "But with a princess." Improvising, Wes told the story of a princess who lived on one of Jupiter's moons, watching the planet's great storms and dreaming of one day visiting it. The princess built a special ship and, after many adventures, managed to navigate through the gas rings, discovering that the Great Red Spot was actually a portal to a magical world. Callie fell asleep before the end, her face relaxed, a small smile on her lips. Wes tucked the blanket around her and, on impulse, lightly kissed her forehead. "Good night, little Jupiter," he whispered. In the living room, Tessa had made tea. 2 steaming cups were waiting on the coffee table. It was late, and they both knew they should say goodbye. But something in the atmosphere, the emotion of the evening, the word "Dad" still echoing between them, called for a conversation. Wes sat on the sofa, accepting the cup Tessa offered. "You're a good storyteller," she commented, sitting in the armchair opposite him. "Do you have practice?" He smiled. "None. But I've improvised a lot in business meetings. It's not that different." They sipped their tea in a comfortable silence for a few moments. "About what Callie said," Wes began finally. "You don't have to be her father," Tessa interrupted gently. "I understand if this is too much." Wes considered the statement, searching for the honest answer within himself. "It's not that it's too much," he said slowly. "It's that I'm afraid of not being enough." Tessa tilted her head, an invitation for him to continue. "I never had a role model," he explained. "My father left when I was very young. I don't know how to be that. Nobody knows at the beginning," Tessa replied. "Believe me, I didn't know how to be a mother either. I still don't know half the time. But you're amazing with her." "Because I don't have a choice," Tessa said, placing her cup on the table. "When you're the only person a child has in the world, you just find a way." Wes absorbed her words, recognizing the truth in them. I got pregnant young, Tessa continued, her voice low, looking at her own hands. Her father left me as soon as he found out. He wanted nothing to do with it. I managed with what I had. Wes watched how she spoke without self-pity, just stating facts. This woman's strength never ceased to amaze him. Didn't your family help? He asked. What family? She smiled humorlessly. I grew up in foster care. I aged out of the system at 18, trying to build my life. I met Callie's father 6 months later. He was charming, said all the right things. When I found out I was pregnant, he showed who he really was. Wes felt a wave of anger toward this unknown man, this ghost who had abandoned two such extraordinary people. I thought about not having the baby, Tessa admitted, her voice even lower. For a moment, I thought I couldn't do it. But then, I decided I would be different from the adults in my life. I wouldn't abandon someone who depended on me. The silence that followed was thick with respect. Wes realized he was witnessing a rare vulnerability. Tessa Morgan was not someone who shared her story easily. Thank you for telling me, he said finally. She shrugged. You have a right to know, considering you're becoming a part of her life. Of your lives, Wes corrected softly. Tessa nodded, accepting the correction. And you, she asked. How did a boy without a father become Wes Barrett, the billionaire? Wes smiled at the characterization. Determination. Luck. A few key people who believed in me at the right time. More than that, Tessa insisted. He sighed, realizing she deserved the same honesty she had offered. Anger, probably, he admitted. I wanted to prove something to the world. To my father, wherever he was. To my mother, who worked herself sick. To myself. And did you prove it? I built all of this, he said, making a vague gesture that encompassed his success. But you know what's strange? Before I met Callie, before you, I never stopped to appreciate it. I was always chasing the next deal, the next acquisition, as if what I already had wasn't enough. And now I realize how empty my life was, he replied honestly. I had everything and nothing at the same time. Tessa nodded, understanding perfectly. There was no need for more words. They both knew that emptiness, though they had arrived at it from completely different paths. You don't have to decide anything tonight, she said, referring to the title Callie had given him. About being or not being, what she wants you to be. I already am, Wes replied with simplicity. It's not something I decide. It's something that happened. The fear was still there, the fear of not knowing how, of not being good enough, of eventually disappointing Callie. But along with it was something stronger, the determination to try, to be present, to learn. Just promise me one thing, Tessa asked, her eyes meeting his. If at any point you realize you can't continue, tell me first. Not her. We'll find a way to explain it, to soften it. A mother's fierce protection, Wes nodded, deeply respecting that concern. I promise. They sat there, sharing the silence of the night, each absorbing the other's story, building an understanding where there had only been assumptions. It wasn't romance, there was no flirting, no tension of that kind between them. It was something equally rare, mutual respect, genuine admiration, and the recognition of souls who, somehow, understood each other's loneliness. When Wes finally stood up to leave, he felt different. Something had shifted that night, not just because of the title Callie had given him, but because of the deeper connection that now existed between him and Tessa. So thanks for the tea, Melly said at the door, and for the conversation. Thank you for making my daughter happy, she replied simply. It wasn't an ordinary good night. It was an acknowledgement of the bond that now united them, not a romantic bond, but something equally profound, a family being formed, not by blood or obligation, but by choice and circumstance. As he drove home, Wes thought about the word that had changed everything, must add. So simple, so complex, a title he hadn't sought, but which he now carried with a mixture of fear and pride. He didn't know how to be a father, but for Callie, for that brilliant child who looked at him as if he were capable of anything, he would learn. Autumn arrived in the city, painting the trees red and gold. 6 months had passed since a 5-year-old girl had approached a stranger outside her school. 6 months that had completely transformed Wes Barrett's life. Sitting in his penthouse office at the Barrett Enterprises building, Wes contemplated the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He had just cancelled his Saturday appointment with Callie, the third in a row. Tessa's voice on the phone had been neutral, even understanding, but he had caught the underlying concern. "She's asking about you," Tessa had said. "She wants to know when you're coming back." "It's temporary," he had assured her. "Just until we resolve this crisis." "Of course," Tessa had replied. "Do what you need to do." Now, staring at the pile of documents on his desk, audit reports, suspicious contracts, compromising emails, Wes felt the weight of corporate responsibilities like never before. The discovery had started as a small irregularity in the numbers, a subsidiary in Asia reporting higher than expected profits. Upon investigation, his CFO had found an elaborate scheme of bribes and inflated contracts. The more they dug, the uglier the situation seemed. Mr. Barrett, Margot, his assistant, appeared at the door. "The board is gathered in the conference room." Wes nodded, organizing the papers. "I'm on my way." As he walked down the hall, his mind drifted to Callie. She would be at the park now, maybe playing on the swing she loved so much, or maybe at home, drawing, waiting for a visit that wouldn't come. Guilt hit him, followed by a wave of doubt. Was he getting too involved? Creating an unhealthy emotional dependence, taking up a space that didn't belong to him. The questions had started 2 weeks earlier, after a casual conversation with Marcus Hemmings, one of the oldest board members. During a business dinner, Marcus had asked about the rumors that the city's most eligible bachelor was playing family, with a cleaning lady and her daughter. "Charity is one thing, Wes," Marcus had said with a condescending smile. "But don't delude yourself into thinking you can replace this child's father. You have responsibilities here. People depend on you." Wes had defended his position, of course. He had made it clear that his personal life was not Marcus's business, nor anyone else's. But the words had planted a seed of doubt that grew with each passing day. In the conference room, 12 serious faces stared at him. The corruption scandal hadn't leaked to the press yet, but when it did, and it would be devastating for the company's reputation. "We have 3 executives directly involved," the head of the legal department reported, "and strong indications that at least 2 board members of the subsidiary were aware." Wes nodded, absorbing the information. "Options? Immediate suspension of those involved, a full audit, full cooperation with the authorities," she replied, "and preparing for the impact on the stock when the news breaks." The next few hours were filled with difficult decisions and tense discussions. When the meeting ended, it was past 10 at night. Back in his office, Wes found his phone had 3 missed calls, all from Tessa. His stomach tightened. She rarely called, preferring text messages for quick communications. Before he could call back, Margot entered again. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mr. Zhao is on the line. It's late in Shanghai. He insists it's urgent." Wes hesitated, looking at the phone. "Put him on line 1, and, Margot, cancel my appointments for tomorrow, all of them." "Yes, sir." The call with the Chinese executive lasted almost 2 hours. When it was over, Wes was too exhausted to even check his messages. He lay down on the sofa in his office, promising himself he would call Tessa in the morning. But the morning brought new crises. The press had gotten wind of the scandal. The company's stock began to fall. The board demanded his constant presence, his leadership, his full attention. The days turned into a week. A week became 2. The Saturdays with Callie, the dinners with Tessa, the bedtime stories, all were swallowed by the avalanche of corporate problems. At some point, Wes realized he hadn't returned Tessa's calls. He hadn't properly explained his absence. Just quick messages, vague promises that he would be back as soon as he could. In the 3rd week of the crisis, as the waters finally began to calm, Wes woke up with a painful clarity. He was doing exactly what he feared most. He was disappearing from Callie's life, just as his own father had disappeared from his. That morning, in the meeting with the executives, he was distracted. His mind wandered to the small apartment across town, to the little girl who now called him Dad. "Wes." The voice of Sarah, his CFO, brought him back to reality. "Do you agree with the strategy?" He looked at her, then at the other faces around the table. "Pardon me," he said, shifting in his chair. "I need a moment." Leaving the room, Wes walked to his office and closed the door. He needed to call Tessa. He needed to explain, to fix things, but when he picked up the phone, he felt paralyzed. What would he say? That the company was more important, that he was having doubts about his role in their lives? No explanation seemed adequate. As he hesitated, Margot knocked on the door. "I'm so sorry to interrupt, but Mr. Hemmings is here with the public relations team. The press conference has been moved up to an hour from now." Wes sighed, putting the phone back on his desk. "I'll be there in a minute." And so another day passed without contact. In Tessa's small apartment, Callie looked out the window, her chin resting on her hands. She had spent the morning like this, watching the street, waiting for a black car that didn't appear. "Honey, come and eat," Tessa called from the kitchen. "I made pancakes, your favorite." Callie didn't answer immediately. When she finally turned around, her eyes lacked their usual sparkle. "He's not coming today either, is he?" Tessa's heart ached. 3 weeks without visits. 3 weeks of empty promises and vague explanations. "He's busy with work, Callie. Adults sometimes have big problems to solve." "Oh, but he always came before, even when he was busy," Callie argued, her voice small. "Does he not want to be my daddy anymore?" Tessa swallowed hard, choosing her words carefully. "Wes cares a lot about you. I'm sure he'll come as soon as he can." But with each passing day, Tessa herself felt the doubt growing. It wasn't just the visits that had stopped, but also the calls, the messages. It was as if Wes Barrett had reconsidered his involvement and opted for a gradual withdrawal. She had seen the news, of course. She knew about the scandal at his company, the investigations, the accusations. But she also knew that a 2-minute phone call to explain the situation wouldn't be impossible. Not even for the busiest man in the world. "I'm not hungry," Callie said, turning away from the window. "Just a little bit, please," Tessa insisted. "You barely touched your dinner last night." Reluctantly, Callie sat at the table and picked up her fork. She ate a few bites to please her mother, but without enthusiasm. Her appetite had diminished along with her joy in recent days. Tessa watched her daughter with growing concern. Callie had always been a vibrant child, full of energy and curiosity. Now she was quiet, withdrawn. The laughter that once filled the apartment had become rare. "How about we go to the park today?" Tessa suggested, trying to cheer her up. "We can take bread for the ducks." "I don't want to," Callie replied, pushing her plate away. "Can I go to my room?" Tessa nodded, watching as the girl walked away, dejected. The void Wes had left was palpable, like a hole in the fabric of their lives. Tessa realized, with a mixture of sadness and anger, how dependent they had become on his presence. Part of her wanted to hate him for it, for coming into their lives, making himself necessary and then disappearing. But another part understood the pressures he faced, the magnitude of the problems at his company. The next morning, Callie woke up with a slight fever. Her normally bright eyes were dull and she complained of a headache. "I don't want to go to school," she murmured, huddled under the blanket. Tessa sat beside her, placing a hand on her forehead. It was warm, but not alarmingly so. "Okay, you can stay home today. I'll call Dr. Patterson." The doctor could see them late in the afternoon. After a thorough examination, he frowned, confused. "Physically, I don't see anything concerning," he told Tessa in a low voice, while Callie flipped through a magazine in the waiting room. "The fever is low, her lungs are clear, her throat is normal. It could be a mild virus, but, Tessa prompted. "But she seems emotionally withdrawn. Has something happened? Any stress at school, a change at home?" Tessa hesitated, then briefly explained about Wes and his sudden withdrawal. The doctor nodded, understanding. Children often manifest physical symptoms when they are emotionally distressed. The fever might be real, but the cause could be more psychological than viral. "What can I do?" Tessa asked, feeling helpless. "So keep her comfortable, monitor the fever, and then maybe it's time for a frank conversation about her relationship with this man." Tessa thanked him, but as she left the office, she knew that any frank conversation would only make things worse. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that the man she had started to see as a father simply had other priorities? At home, Callie lay on the sofa, hugging the teddy bear Wes had given her months ago. She seemed smaller and more fragile, lost in thoughts she couldn't express. "Want me to read you a story?" Tessa offered, sitting beside her. "I want the story about the king of the blue planet," Callie replied in a low voice. "The one Dad tells." Tessa felt a lump in her throat. "I don't know that one, sweetie. Can you tell it to me?" But Callie just shook her head, hugging the bear tighter. That night, after Callie finally fell asleep, Tessa stared at her phone for long minutes. She had tried calling Wes several times in the past weeks, always going to voicemail. Her texts received brief and increasingly sparse replies. Maybe it was time to accept reality. Wes Barrett had moved on. The family experiment was over. Better to cut ties now, before Callie got even more attached. But then she remembered the look in his eyes when he told Callie stories, the way they laughed together, sharing jokes only they understood. The drawing the girl had made, proudly hanging on the wall, "Me and my friend Wes." With trembling fingers, Tessa typed one last message, short and direct. "She misses you." She sent it before she could change her mind and put the phone aside, not expecting a reply. Wes was in his car, driving home after another exhausting day, when the message arrived. 3 simple words that hit him with the force of a freight train. "She misses you." He pulled over to the side of the road, staring at the phone screen. The guilt he had been trying to ignore exploded in his chest. What was he doing? How could he let corporate pressures push him away from the 2 people who mattered most in his life? Without a second thought, he changed direction. The car clock read 10:37 p.m. when he parked in front of the familiar building. Too late for a visit, but he couldn't wait until morning. He took the stairs 2 at a time and knocked lightly on the door. A few moments later, Tessa opened it, surprise written on her tired face. "Wes." "Sorry about the time," he said, his voice hoarse. "I need to see her." Tessa hesitated for only a second, then opened the door wider. "She's asleep, but—" She gestured down the hall. "You can come in." The apartment was quiet and partially dark, only a small lamp lit in the living room. Wes immediately noticed the dark circles under Tessa's eyes, the tension in her shoulders. "How is she?" he asked, keeping his voice low. "Sick," Tessa replied simply. "Physically, nothing serious. Emotionally." She left the sentence unfinished, but her look said it all. Wes felt the weight of his absence like never before. "Tyler, can I see her?" Tessa nodded, leading him to the small bedroom. Callie was asleep, her face flushed from the low fever, her hair spread across the pillow. She was hugging the teddy bear tightly, as if afraid it too might disappear. Wes sat carefully on the edge of the bed, watching her breathe. How could he have stayed away? How could he have let anything, even a corporate crisis, separate him from this child who had become so important in his life? As if sensing his presence, Callie's eyes slowly opened. For a moment, she seemed confused, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Then recognition and joy lit up her feverish face. "Daddy?" she whispered, her voice small and hoarse. "You came back." Wes felt unexpected tears burn his eyes. "I'm back," he confirmed, taking her small, warm hand. "I'm sorry it took so long." Callie squeezed his fingers with surprising strength. "I missed you so much," she murmured, her eyes already heavy with sleep again. "I missed you too," Wes replied, emotion making it hard to speak. "I'm never going to disappear from your life again." A small smile touched Callie's lips before she drifted back to sleep, still holding his hand tightly. Wes remained there, motionless, feeling the weight of the promise he had just made. It was not a light promise, nor one made in the heat of the moment. It was a commitment that would redefine his priorities, his life. From the doorway, Tessa watched the scene in silence, her own heart torn between hope and caution. Part of her wanted to believe his words. Another part feared that in the next crisis, he would disappear again. But for now, on that quiet night, with the moon shining through the bedroom window, there was peace. The emptiness that had taken over the house in recent weeks had been filled again by the presence of this man who, in some inexplicable way, had become essential in their lives. And whether that peace would last or not, Only time would tell. The Saturday sun warmed the city as Wes parked in front of Tessa and Callie's building. He had planned the day meticulously. First the toy store Callie mentioned so often, then lunch at her favorite restaurant, and finally an afternoon at Central Park, a perfect day for an important conversation. Since his return 3 weeks ago, after his brief but painful absence, Wes had reflected a lot on his place in Callie's life. The doubts that had once plagued him, whether he was taking up a space that didn't belong to him, whether he had the right to call himself a father, had been replaced by a quiet certainty. The crisis at the company, now under control, had taught him a valuable lesson about priorities. Callie was waiting at the entrance, as always, hopping from one foot to the other. She wore denim overalls and a yellow t-shirt with a sunflower design. Her hair was in 2 braids, probably Tessa's handiwork. "You're here!" she exclaimed when she saw him, running to hug his legs. Wes bent down, returning the hug properly. "Punctual as always, ready for our special day." She nodded enthusiastically. "Mommy said we're going to the toy store. Can I pick anything?" "Anything reasonable," Wes replied with a smile. "I don't think a real elephant would fit in the apartment." Callie laughed, a sound that still warmed Wes's heart every time he heard it. Tessa appeared at the door, holding Callie's small lilac backpack, the same one she wore the day she met Wes. "There's a jacket in there in case it gets colder later," she explained, handing the backpack to Wes. "And some snacks. Oh, and the motion sickness medicine, if you guys go on any spinning rides." Wes took the backpack, noticing how Tessa seemed more rested lately. Since he had returned and reorganized his time, delegating more responsibilities at the company, setting clear boundaries between work and personal life, a new stability had settled into their lives. "Don't worry," he assured her. "We'll have a quiet day." Something passed between them, a silent understanding, a restored trust. Tessa smiled slightly and waved to Callie. "Have fun, sweetie, and don't ask for anything outrageously expensive." "Okay, Mommy." In the car, Callie chatted excitedly about school, about the new book she was reading, more looking at the pictures than actually reading, and about the science project she was planning. Wes listened attentively, asking questions at the right moments, admiring how her mind worked, always curious, always making surprising connections. The Wonder World Toys store occupied 2 floors of a building in the shopping district. As soon as they entered, Callie's eyes widened at the explosion of colors, sounds, and possibilities. "Where do we start?" Wes asked, watching her take in the environment. Callie looked around, considering her options. "I want to see the stuffed animals first," she finally decided. They walked to the stuffed animal section, where shelves upon shelves displayed animals of all types and sizes. There were giant bears almost as tall as Callie, giraffes with flexible necks, lions with realistic manes, and even fantastical creatures like unicorns and dragons. Callie walked slowly through the section, touching each animal carefully, as if evaluating not only its appearance but also its personality. Wes followed her patiently, amazed at the seriousness with which she approached the choice. After nearly 20 minutes of careful deliberation, Callie stopped in front of a more discreet shelf. There, among more elaborate and flashy stuffed animals, was a simple brown teddy bear. It wasn't the biggest, nor the most colorful, nor the most sophisticated. It was just an ordinary brown bear, with bright black eyes and a small red bow around its neck. "This one," she said, taking it from the shelf. "I want this one." Wes looked at the bear, then at the multitude of more impressive options around them. "Are you sure you can choose anyone you want?" Callie nodded, hugging the little bear. "He looks lonely." "And he's warm." Something about the simplicity of that choice and the explanation touched Wes deeply. Callie wasn't looking for the most expensive or the flashiest. She had seen something in the little brown bear that others would have overlooked, a quality that spoke directly to her heart. "Then he's perfect," Wes agreed. At the checkout, as he was paying, the clerk offered to gift wrap it, but Callie refused. "He needs to breathe," she explained seriously, making Wes smile. Lunch was at the Colorful Corner, a children's restaurant where the tables were small, colorful wooden houses, and the food came on animal-shaped plates. Callie carefully placed the little bear in the chair next to her, occasionally talking to him and offering him a bit of her milkshake. "What are you going to name him?" Wes asked, watching the interaction. Callie considered the question seriously. "I think Brownie," she decided. "Just because he's brown like a brownie, and brownies are warm and delicious." "Excellent choice," Wes approved. "Brownie is lucky to have found you." After lunch, they headed to Central Park. The day was perfect. Not too hot, not too cold, with a light breeze rustling the leaves on the trees. Families were spread out on the lawns, children ran and laughed, couples walked hand in hand along the winding paths. Wes and Callie, with Brownie held firmly against her chest, walked to the playground. For almost an hour, Wes pushed her on the swing, held her as she crossed the rope bridge, and applauded when she came down the slide with her arms raised in triumph. When she finally tired of the more energetic games, Callie asked for ice cream. They sat on a wooden bench near the lake, licking chocolate and vanilla cones, watching the ducks swim peacefully in the water. The moment was perfect. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. The shadows stretched across the lawn, and a quiet peace hung over the park. Wes looked at Callie, her mouth stained with chocolate ice cream, her eyes bright as she watched the ducks, Brownie carefully positioned on her lap so he could also see the lake. In that instant, he felt absolute clarity about what he needed to say. "Callie," he began, his voice soft. Can I talk to you about something important?" She tore her gaze away from the ducks, turning her full attention to him. "Okay." Wes took a deep breath, searching for the right words a 5-year-old could understand, but that would carry the full weight of his commitment. "You know, I never thought about being a dad," he said finally. "I never imagined I would have a child in my life. I was busy with work, with other things." Callie watched him intently, licking her ice cream more slowly now. "But then I met you," Wes continued, "and being with you changed everything. You made me realize what's really important. You're a part of me now, you understand." She tilted her head slightly, processing his words. "Like when we eat a cookie and it stays inside us?" she asked, trying to grasp the concept. Wes smiled. "A little like that, yes. But not just in the stomach, here too." He pointed to his own heart. Callie's ice cream began to melt, dripping down her fingers, but she barely noticed, focused on the conversation. "I want you to know," Wes continued, gently holding her gaze, "that I will be your dad for as long as you want me to be, not just on weekends or special days, always." Something in Callie's eyes shone with understanding. Without warning, she dropped the rest of her ice cream into the trash can next to the bench and threw herself into a hug, almost knocking Brownie over in the process. The little bear was squeezed between them, a silent witness to that moment. "I want you to be my dad forever," she whispered against his chest. "Forever and ever and ever." Wes hugged her back, feeling an emotion he couldn't name fill his chest. It wasn't just love, it was belonging, purpose, a deep certainty of being exactly where he was supposed to be. After a long moment, Callie pulled away slightly, picking up Brownie. "Brownie wants you to be his dad too," she declared with seriousness. Wes laughed softly, accepting the little bear she offered him. "It would be an honor to be a dad to you both." With the sun beginning to set, they left the bench and walked across the lawn, stopping occasionally for Callie to admire a flower or an interesting rock. They found a quiet spot under a large tree where they sat in the grass. "Can I take a picture of us?" Wes asked, pulling out his phone. Callie nodded enthusiastically, positioning herself next to him and holding up Brownie so he would be in the photo too. 1, 2, 3, smile. Wes captured the moment, the three of them together, with the sunset creating a golden glow in the background. Looking at the image, he felt a deep satisfaction. With a few taps on the screen, he added a caption to the photo. "Father and daughter by heart." He showed it to Callie, who smiled when she saw the words, even though she couldn't quite read them all yet. "What does it say?" she asked. "Father and daughter by heart," Wes read. "Because sometimes families aren't just made when people are born together. Sometimes they're made when hearts find each other." Callie considered this for a moment, then nodded, as if it made perfect sense to her. She rested her head on his shoulder, hugging Brownie to her chest. Wes put his arm around her, feeling the small, warm head against his side, the light, trusting weight of her body. The moment was perfect in its simplicity. They didn't need any more words. A few yards away, partially hidden by an oak tree, Tessa watched the scene. She had left work early and decided to stop by the park, not to spy, but to witness. Something told her today would be an important day. Silent tears streamed down her face as she watched Wes and Callie together under the tree. The little girl nestled against him, as if it were her natural place. But they were not tears of sadness or jealousy. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of a peace that only a mother could understand upon seeing her child loved and protected. For years, she had carried the weight of motherhood alone. She had wondered if Callie would always feel the absence of a father, if there would always be a void in her life that Tessa couldn't fill, no matter how hard she tried. And then, through the most unlikely of encounters, a stranger had entered their lives. Not a savior, not a prince charming, but a real man with his own flaws and fears, who had chosen to love her daughter not out of obligation, but by choice. Tessa wiped the tears with the back of her hand, a small smile forming on her lips. She didn't approach. That moment belonged to them, but as she turned to leave, she carried with her a comforting certainty. They were a family now. Unconventional, not defined by blood or certificates, but a true family, united by choice, by love, and by a little brown bear named Brownie. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.